Last week on the podcast, we talked all about improving your consistency. Consistency could be one of the reasons why your content and your efforts are not converting. But there's another sneaky little thing that might be happening that is a huge player when it comes to taking an audience and converting them into sales. And it's all about your messaging. You know that messaging is key, but what does that actually mean? What role does it play and how do we improve it? If you're putting in the work, you're posting your content, you're writing your emails, you're making your sales pages, and people are not taking the action that you desire, it could be a messaging issue. And today I'm going to break down the importance of messaging, and we're going to talk about 3 specific mistakes you might be making, because hey, those are easy to identify, and how to fix them.
This is the Authentic Brand Builders Podcast with Michelle Knight.
Welcome back, Authentic Brand Builder, to another episode here on the podcast. I am so excited that you are joining me today, whether you are listening in your earbuds, driving in your car, or you're watching this video on YouTube, which, just a friendly reminder, I do release video recordings of all of our podcast episodes over on my YouTube channel. You can check it out at brandmary.com/YouTube. And if you're already here, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss my bonus trainings that I release outside of the podcast. All right, today we're talking about messaging. It is one of my favorite topics to talk about. It is such a pillar of the branding process and the marketing process. It's something that you establish at the branding phase that is going to support you in all of your marketing efforts. And just in the intro, I mentioned that you could be taking all of these different actions, posting your videos, posting on social media, writing your emails, making your web pages, whatever it is that you are actively doing, but it's just not getting results. When we first address a consistency issue, which we talked about last week, and we look at how many views is it actually getting, that top of the funnel, which I released a bonus video all about on my YouTube channel. If we address those 2 issues and we're still having trouble, then it's most likely messaging. And that's why I wanted to have this video, this episode today, as a continuation of those previous topics that I've been chatting about. Messaging really is how people connect and perceive the work that you do. Messaging is how people perceive and connect to your brand. It goes so much deeper than just what you're saying, and it's really about how you're describing it to your ideal customer. Because when messaging is clear, it's specific, and it's compelling, it makes marketing so much easier, and it's ultimately going to help you reach your goal, which is increasing sales in your business. But what happens is a lot of entrepreneurs will start off being really vague because they're afraid to get specific, which is a horrible mistake. Hint, hint. Their messaging might be really confusing. Maybe they're not specifically speaking to their ideal customer because they're afraid to get specific with an ideal customer, or they're not quite sure exactly what their brand actually stands for. Maybe they haven't done the branding work, and so their messaging is inconsistent. It's confusing. And any of those things really can be a recipe for messaging mayhem. Because when you're not clear, when you're not specific, when your messaging isn't compelling, pulling people in, then people are going to scroll right past everything that you do. Or they're just going to open your email and mindlessly read through it kind of, and then move on to the thing that they were previously, because people get distracted very freaking easily. We know this to be true. We are those people as well. And so when you think about the type of messaging that you really gravitate toward, chances are it has these 3 specific qualities. It is clear, it is specific, and it is compelling. Not to mention, consistent messaging across all platforms, all of your different channels, can increase your revenue. Studies show that consistent messaging across all platforms can give you a significant boost in brand recognition, upwards of 23%. This is because it takes people multiple touch points in order to start taking action. And so if they're getting confusing or mixed messages from you, they're not going to be super clear on what your brand stands for or how your brand can ultimately support them. But when you are crystal clear and you're reaching them first, maybe in an Instagram post, and then they watch a YouTube video from you, and then they also get your email, they now have a clear understanding of what it is your brand stands for and how your brand can specifically support them. The good news is messaging is a skill that you can fine tune, and I'm going to give you specific formulas in order to do that. But in order to get there, we have to talk about the 3 mistakes that you most likely are making right now. So let's jump in to number 1. All right, so the first mistake, and this across the board is the most common thing that I see entrepreneurs doing, is that their messaging is just too vague. I do a lot of one-on-one messaging work with my clients, specifically inside of the academy and in my program Roadmap to Freedom. And when new entrepreneurs are just getting started, it's really common for them to be too vague, too wide. They're casting too wide of a net because they're not narrowed in on exactly who they want to serve and who is going to actually benefit the greatest from them. And I get that it's really hard because we see these really big, monstrous brands online, whether they're big box stores or they're more influencer type of brands, and they might have this very vague, widespread messaging because they've built up an audience, they've built up a reputation, you know them by their name, and so they have started to branch out, maybe serve multiple ideal customers, maybe branch out into different niches. But they didn't start that way. And that's what I really want you to remember. And the more specific you can be at the beginning, the faster you will grow. So saying things like, I help people grow their business, or I empower women to live their best lives, sounds like everybody else. And they don't tell your audience specifically how you and your brand are going to help them and what makes you different than everyone else. Because in case you needed another reminder, although I feel like I say it all the time, there are a lot of people doing what you are doing or setting out to do what you want to do. And that makes the market crowded. Yes, not lacking opportunity, because the opportunity is there. Consumerism is at a high, especially in the online course, coaching, consultant, program industry. However, because there are so many people are shopping around more than they used to. And so when your messaging is clear and specific and your ideal customer sees that, they're ready to take that action with your brand specifically because you're clearly speaking to them. That's what gets all of us to take action. I get it. You worry about niching down too much. You want to appeal to everyone, but you really can't in the beginning. Not if you want to grow quickly. The more specific you are, and I'm not suggesting you go into a tiny little box and you stay there forever. I'm just asking you to get specific with the key points of what do you provide, what problem do you solve, and who do you serve. Truly, those are the 3 areas that you want to get super specific. Then you can play with the type of content you're creating that leads that person to the purchase decision. Because there might be different things that pull them in. I do videos on storytelling. I do videos on SEO. I've done videos on messaging and podcast episodes on my journey. Those are all ways for my ideal customer to find me. But then when it comes time to communicate what I do, that is all the same. So how do we fix this? How do we go from broad messaging to specific messaging? How do we go from trying to help everyone to helping a very specific type of person? It really comes down to taking it a step further. Instead of saying, I help people with fitness, you could say, I help busy moms lose weight without cutting carbs and spending hours at the gym. That little tweak pulls in your specific audience, which is busy moms. It also addresses 2 of their massive pain points, that they don't want to cut carbs because carbs are delicious, and they don't want to spend hours at the gym because they're busy moms and they don't have the time. So you're speaking very specifically to your ideal customer. Yes, someone who's not a busy mom might look away from that messaging and move on to another brand. And that is okay, because when your ideal customer lands on your specific page, they're going to go, whoa, this brand is for me, not is this brand for me? You get it? So in order to do this, it's a very simple formula. I help who do what without a big objection, right? We already used the example, cutting carbs and hitting the gym. Or, because I love options, you can also do I help who Remember, we're being specific with who the who is, not just people. Do whatever problem they want solved so they can the desired outcome. So you could say, I help busy moms who want to lose weight so they can, whatever the benefit might be, so they can run a half marathon. That sounds aggressive. So they can feel healthy and confident in their body. So they can run around and play with their kids without being winded. See what I'm saying? Now, this is a great example of kind of your big hook statement, which is something that we prioritize and teach a lot here at Brand Mary. But this also trickles into how we set up our core brand messages, which I teach inside of my branding course, You Branded. And those are specifically messages that are set up in this similar way, but there are multiple that you have for your brand that can help you prepare your content and can move over to a sales page that can be used on a freebie page, what have you. The core structure is the same for all of the different type of messages that you will create for your business. And again, the key takeaway is specificity, because the more vague and broad you are, the less specific you are. And what's ironic is that you're going broad because you don't want to turn anyone away, but by going broad, you actually will turn more people away. Funny how that works, isn't it? Okay, mistake number 2. Your messaging lacks storytelling. This is the connection. This is the compelling piece, my friend. This is what we're all about here at Brand Mary. Oozing storytelling into every single aspect of your business. Not just the About Me page and the beginning of your brand, but also in all of the content that you're creating. Every email that you're writing. Literally everything that you create has an opportunity to have storytelling integrated into it, which is going to help your messaging stand out. And it's going to help your message be remembered, which is crucial in the online space. So maybe the first mistake wasn't you. Maybe you are doing a good job of explaining what you do and being specific, but maybe it's not landing emotionally with your ideal customer. We have to pull at the heartstrings. And that doesn't mean that we constantly have to be like, you're doing this wrong, or you feel this pain. It's not pain marketing driven. It's just connecting deeply with your audience, understanding them first and foremost, so that you then can integrate stories and storytelling principles so that your audience knows that you understand them. There are 2 key fundamentals to storytelling: authority and empathy, and both can be achieved through storytelling, specifically micro storytelling, which we'll talk about now. A lot of the lack of storytelling happens because entrepreneurs are focused on information, logistics, information, and less focused on the transformation. And that's what ultimately gets people to buy. We don't make purchase decisions based on logistical information. We actually make a purchase decision based on how we feel. And that's not conscious, like we're doing that on a subconscious level, but that is ultimately why we choose to buy a specific product or buy with a specific brand. So an example of this would be, rather than starting off a social media post or an email by saying, I help small business owners with their branding, I would instead pull my audience in with a story. I could say, when I started my business, I really struggled to stand out in a crowded market. I was posting almost every single day, and it was just crickets. It wasn't until I cracked the secret to my brand messaging that allowed me to start standing out. And without making any other changes, I started converting in my business at 10% from the same content that was getting absolutely nothing. And now I help small business owners do the same. I help them crack the code to their messaging so they can connect deeply with their audience and create a brand that generates revenue. Do you see the difference? I've set up and said the exact same thing, but I've done it through storytelling. And the way storytelling affects the brain, the neural coupling, all the things that are happening in the brain that I've talked about so many times on this podcast, that is all triggered. And it's really, the way I describe it is kind of like bunny ears, right? It's like your audience is on social media or they're consuming your content wherever, they're scrolling through and they start to see this story and it pulls them in and their bunny ears go up and go, oh, tell me more. So doing this at the beginning of a post that ultimately has a CTA to grab your freebie or watch your webinar or make a purchase from you is going to do a heck of a lot better than the one starting with, I help small business owners with their branding. So the key here really is to use micro stories. This was a story, but it was very small. It was only 2 sentences. And it can be used even in the shortest form of content. So in order to achieve this, you just want to follow the storytelling formula, which pretty much is universal, and it is pain, shift, solution. What are they feeling now? What needs to shift? And what is the solution? So for our storytelling reference, what was the pain that was being felt? The struggle, the pain, whichever you want to classify it as. What shift happened and what was the solution? So show the struggle, the turning point, and how you ultimately help. Another way that you can look at this is to also use the same 3-part formula, but do obstacle, realization, outcome. So what was the obstacle or pain or struggle you were facing? What was the realization that you had or the shift? And then what was the outcome that happened? Ultimately, at the end of the day, you want to make your audience feel something, and that all comes from micro storytelling. And the final mistake that you might be making, and this connects to last week's episode, which was all about consistency, is that you might be changing your messaging too often. It's kind of like a messaging identity crisis. You're not quite sure who you are, who you help, and how you can communicate that because A, you skipped the branding phase and just went straight into marketing, or B, you don't feel confident. And because you're not getting those immediate results from the content and the messages that you're putting out there, you immediately think that something is wrong. But the reality is that we have got to stick it out a little bit longer than just a week of doing something. And I mentioned this last week on the podcast, but really setting a minimum of 30 to 90 days, I push more for 90, but 30 to 90 days of staying really consistent with a specific type of messaging is going to allow you to better understand, is that working? And if it is working, which parts are working best and which parts are not working as well? Because the more time that you kind of sit and like massage, I'm actually thinking about like making focaccia. I made focaccia yesterday. But like that process, like the more that I do that, the better the bread ultimately is. And so the more that you kind of massage your message and pick out little pieces and make small tweaks and just keep saying the same thing over and over again, but in different ways, the better off you are going to be. I have a great example for you. If you really want to go down a freaking rabbit hole, go back to the very first video I ever posted on my YouTube channel. You're going to have to go back a little bit away, but you can go to brandmary.com/YouTube, and I'll also link it below if you're watching on YouTube right now. My very first video I ever created was around brand story, and that was 9 years ago. So I have consistently been talking about brand storytelling for 9 years in a lot of different ways. But that first 90 days, I was taking different angles to talk about brand storytelling. I was talking about why it was important. I was talking about the framework. I was talking about mistakes that you might be making. I was talking about tweaks on improving it. And I got to see what people really responded to. I knew it was a topic that was important to my ideal customer. I knew it was a topic that I specialized in, but how I messaged it, I needed to figure that out. And you don't have to stick with the same thing for 9 years, but I just wanted to use that as an example. And you'll see me do this quite often in my business. If you really kind of zoom out, you'll see that I'm talking about content creation for 60 or 90 days. I'm talking about messaging. Even 9 years later, because the industry changes and consumer behavior changes, I am still setting a minimum goal for myself to consistently fine-tune and massage that messaging to find what's working best. And none of it goes to waste. That's the beautiful part. Every piece of content is only helping you improve. And you might even unlock the one really early on that just like nails it. And then you can run with that. But constantly tweaking your messaging, constantly tweaking your sales page, constantly tweaking all of these different things because you're worried it's not working is actually sending mixed signals to your audience that is paying attention. There are people paying attention. They're just waiting for you to say the thing in the right way that resonates with them. Another example for you is my very first year in business, I was showing up. I was going live every single week in my Facebook group. I was posting, I was sending emails. And it wasn't until I sat down and I really honed in on my ideal customer, made myself get even more specific, and started crafting my message in a different way because it was not converting before. That one small tweak and who I was speaking to and speaking specifically to them, saying the same freaking thing I had been saying, but that one small adjustment resulted in my first paying client. And it can be those small little adjustments and tweaks, not some big overhaul. And the only way you're going to figure out what those small adjustments are is to have this consistency. And it's totally normal. You're still figuring things out, most likely, for so many of you listening. And in the beginning, it can feel really scary to commit to one thing. But when you keep switching it up, people don't get a chance to ultimately connect with you and learn from you and understand what it is you bring to the table. It's really important that we are narrowing in and thinking about the key pillars of our brand as a whole, and then presenting them in different ways. So if you decide that you are going to be a mindset mentor, then speaking specifically about mindset, but different types of mindset, makes a lot of sense. But if you're coming out of the gate talking about mindset week 1, and then week 2, you're talking about social media marketing, as in like marketing tactics, not mindset around social media marketing. And week 3, you're starting to talk about how to improve your sales page. You're all over the place. Now, you can talk about those things, but from a mindset angle. If your audience is confused, you lose. Donald Miller said that, and I love it. So being as specific as possible with the type of content that you're creating and who you're speaking to, and then staying consistent with that really is important for those people who are watching you, because I promise they are. So my recommendation is to choose one clear core message. And again, we create these core brand messages inside of all of my programs, inside of You Branded, my branding course, Roadmap to Freedom, doors opening soon. But when you create that clear core message, well, in my case, it was brand storytelling, right? Stick to it for a minimum of 30 days, preferably 90 days, and share it in a lot of different ways. And if that scares you and you're like, okay, well, what I actually need is a little bit of variety because I'm trying to figure out what I like talking about, give yourself a goal of doing 90 days, but you need to be posting frequently. So if email marketing is going to be your main strategy and you need to be doing 2 to 3 emails, and one of those emails every single week has to be focused in on this core brand message. If you're prioritizing social media and you're going to be posting 5 days a week, I would aim for 2 or 3 of those days being on this core brand message. So you can sprinkle in some other things, but you want to have that one message, the majority of the type of content that you are creating during that period, to really understand what people are gravitating to and what's getting you the best results. Remember, it doesn't have to be perfect. It never will be perfect, but you just have to get started and you have to stay consistent with it. Again, if you struggle with consistency, I highly recommend you check out last week's episode. If I do say so, it was a fantastic episode. I gave you 5 very actionable ways to improve your consistency as a business owner. All right. So to wrap up this episode, my friend, I hope that you were able to identify at least one of those areas that might be affecting you and have a clear starting place. Now, a couple other things that I recommend doing if you're still feeling a little fuzzy is to do a messaging audit. Look at the last 5 or 7 pieces of content that you created. Maybe it's a blog, a YouTube video, whatever it is that you're doing regularly, and ask yourself if they are clear and specific. Do they speak to your audience's struggles and desires? And if you don't know, and this is a really fun strategy that you can use, you can actually ask ChatGPT or another AI tool to let you know if this is clear and specific and who they think the ideal customer is, and see what they say. Were you spot on? It's a great way to audit the kind of work that you're already doing and figure out ways to improve it. Again, remember to stick to messaging long enough so you can test it and ultimately refine it. This is true for offers. This is true for freebies. See, a lot of people post a freebie for a week and they're like, nobody wanted it. Well, there's a lot of reasons that might not be working for you specifically, but we want to rule out messaging pretty quickly. And so the more you talk about it and the different angles that you create to promote it, you're going to be able to figure out what works best. Same with your offers, especially if you're doing something on Evergreen. Maybe it's an Evergreen course or a one-to-one. If you talk about it one time and you're like, well, no one liked it. No, talk about it a lot. Talk about it every single day in different forms of content and different ways. Not just, hey, book a call, or hey, I work with this client. Use storytelling. Have a different CTA. Play with your messaging to find what works for you. And remember, use very specific and simple language. We often think, especially for coming from a corporate world, that we need to use jargon or a specific type of language, but we just need to use the language our audience is using. And if you're not crystal clear on that, then you definitely need to get inside of You Branded, because You Branded is my signature branding course, and it is going to teach you how to identify your ideal customer, how to create a customer profile using the thorough workbooks in my 3-step process inside the program plus AI. And it's going to give you a clear map of your customer buying journey, so you know which type of messages and what type of language to use at each stage of the buying process. It's also going to help you specify your niche, create your core brand messages, map out your offer, and choose your overall brand vibe with your voice, your colors, your fonts, and your aesthetic. If you want more details on that, you can always check it out at brandmary.com/youbranded. All right, brand messaging is a big deal. Big deal. And a lot of the things that I have just been seeing as we are a couple months into 2025 now are lack of consistency, which we talked about last week, not getting in front of enough people, which is our top of the funnel video that I released on YouTube, and brand messaging. And now you have 3 ways. Put these 3 things in place, and I promise you will see results. Enough people see your brand, you're consistent with it, and you're fine-tuning your messaging. I mean, that's kind of the sweet spot. When it comes to messaging, you've probably already noticed, because I've mentioned a few of them, there are a lot of different ways messaging plays a role, which is why I'm so excited, because I am kicking off with my first challenge of the year. It's a free challenge, and it's going to be the brand, and it's all about brand clarity breakthrough. I want to support you in figuring out these key brand messages for your brand and how to really elevate your brand as a whole, so that even if you have a small audience right now, you are converting them at a high rate. Even if you are just getting started and you don't have a huge following, you are growing quickly when you are fine-tuning your messaging. And if you are at the stage where you're getting a lot of traffic, but you're not seeing the conversions that you want, this is going to be stellar for you as well. We are kicking it off on April 6th. If you want more details and you want to get signed up, head to brandmary.com/challenge and snag your free spot in this year's challenge. As a reminder, go check out my YouTube channel, brandmary.com/YouTube. There are tons of resources and bonus videos there that are not part of the podcast episodes. And if you are listening on your device right now, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, or another one, take a few seconds and give me a thumbs up or star it or write a review or whatever is convenient for you. I love hearing from you and reading your reviews, and I just really appreciate you taking your time to learn from me and absorb the knowledge that I've gained these 9 years as a business owner. I will be back with another episode next week, my friend. And don't forget to check out the Brand Clarity Breakthrough Challenge. It's kicking off in April. You can go to brandmary.com/challenge to get signed up.